All right, potential algebra students, this is Miss Wetland here. We have one last task that you need to do, and that is to correct your review. So if you can have your review paper out in front of you, that should be completed. Take out a pen, and I'm going to have you correct the review as I go through the answers and kind of give you some tips and tricks to remember for the test. All right, so on the front side, you are to match up the properties with the equations that are written. If I were to approach this, I would start with the ones that I know first and kind of use the process of elimination. So I know, for example, that the multiplicative property of 0 is when I multiply a number by 0. So if I take a look over here, I can see that this first one, second one down would be C. When I multiply a number by 0, the product is 0. I know that then I have those identity properties that aren't going to change the value of the number. So the multiplicative identity property tells me when I multiply a number by 1, I'm not going to change the identity of the number. It remains the same. Whereas the additive identity tells me when I add 0 to a number, I'm not going to change the identity of the number. It will remain the same. Then I get into the inverse properties. Inverse kind of reminds me to think of opposite. So when I take a look at additive inverse, I know like that would be a positive 5 and a negative 5, or a 5 minus 5, which would be letter E. If I go to multiplicative inverse, that is multiplying by the reciprocal. So if I take a look at the list from here, which one has me multiplying by the inverse or the reciprocal? The very bottom one would be D. Thinking back to our acting, remember the commutative property is when the numbers commute or the numbers move. So I'm looking for the example where the numbers are moving around. And in that case, that would be the second from the bottom here would be letter F. This 7x went from being at the end of the problem to being at the beginning. The associative property deals with who you group with. And so remember, in math, grouping happens with grouping symbols. So now I'm looking for the place where the grouping symbols change. The numbers don't move, but the grouping symbols do, or the parentheses do. And that would be the one that is right up at the top. Because notice in this one, it kept 4, 7x, 4, 7x. All that changed was what the parentheses were around. And the problem stayed entirely the same. Then I'm down to 2, the distributive property and no property. Remember, the distributive property is when you have a number outside the parentheses and you multiply it by what's inside the parentheses, which leaves I to be the last one. It might look like the associative property, but if we look closely, notice that this includes adding and multiplying, and if we switch the parentheses around, is the answer going to stay the same? No. So therefore, that would not be a property. We know all of these have to make true statements. So if they make mathematical statements that aren't going to be equal to each other, we know that those are incorrect. Right? So that deals with the properties. On the back, we start with the distributive property. Like I said before, the distributive property tells you that you multiply the number inside, or excuse me, on the outside by each of the numbers on the inside. So this would be 5x plus 10. For B, if you distribute the 9, 9 times 3 would be 27x, and then we go 9 times, think of this as a negative 10, would be minus 90. And the next one, we're distributing both a letter and a number. So the 4 times 2 would make that 8, and the A just comes along with the B. The 4 times the negative 6 would be negative 24, and the A comes along with the C. We do not distribute to the 10AC because that is outside the parentheses, so we simply just bring that down. But now we look to combine like terms. My like terms would be the negative 24 and the positive 10. So 8AB minus 14AC would be the simplified expression. When you have multiple brackets or parentheses, you start by distributing with what's furthest in the inside. So if I start with this first one, I'm going to leave the 2 and the bracket and the x, but now I'm distributing a positive 8. 8 times 5 would be 40, and 8 times a negative x would be negative 8x. Then I distribute the 2 to what's inside, or simplify the expression. It does not matter. I'm maybe going to combine the like terms, so I have less to distribute to. An x and a negative x would be a negative 7x, and then I would still have the plus 40. If I distribute the 2, I get negative 14x plus 80. Now, if you had 80 minus 14x, that would be okay too. Those are similar expressions because their terms are the same. In the next set, we're undistributing. That means we're pulling out the greatest factor. So in this first one, I see 2 and 10, and I know 2 is their greatest factor. So I pull out a 2 from the x and a 2 from the 10. That means I'm dividing. So it would be x plus 5 in parentheses. In letter B, I look at 8 and 36, and 2 goes into them, but the greatest common factor is 4, so I'm going to pull out a 4. 4 times 2 is 8, so it'd be 2a. And then 4 times 9, so it would be 2a plus 9 in parentheses. In C, I look at 20, 12, and 4, and their greatest common factor is 4, but I also see that all of them have x's as well, so I pull out a 4 and an x. When I do that, I end up with 5 minus 3y plus yz inside parentheses. And then the last one, 12, 13, and 14's greatest common factor is 1, so I can't really pull out a 1, but they all have a b. So if I pull out a b, I would end up with 12a plus 13c minus 14ac. That's undistributing. Then the last two parts were on order of operations. Again, remember to show your work algebraically. So in the first one, I'm going to start with the multiplying. It would be 6 plus 6 minus 1, or 12 minus 1, which is 11. In letter B, I'm going to start with the parentheses, and inside the parentheses, I start with the power. So it would be 11 minus 25, because 5 squared means 5 times 5, plus 9 divided by 3. If I finish what's in the parentheses, I have 2 and then a negative 14 plus 9 divided by 3. It's okay to do the multiplication and the division in one step and then add them together to get an answer of negative 25. In the next one, I'm going to multiply the 29 and the 1 together because that's easy just to simplify up, and that would equal 29 plus, now I'm going to bring down the 2 and I have to deal with what's in parentheses. Inside the parentheses I do order of operations, which means I do the 20 divided by 4 first, which would be 5 minus 5. Our 29 plus 2 times 0, 2 times 0 is 0, so my answer would be 29. When there is a fraction bar, I do what's on top and on the bottom before I deal with the fraction. So on top, if I did each of the multiplications, it would be 36 plus 12 all over 24, which is 48 over 24, which is in turn 2. You use order of operations down for number 7, but with this one, you first have to use substitution, which means I rewrite the problem substituting in the numbers that they gave me for each letter, and then I work through and solve it. So for 7a, it would be 21. When two letters are next to each other, that means to multiply. So 5 times 4 minus 2 times 10, or 20 minus 20, which is 0. And then the last one, I have z squared, which would be 10 squared plus 3, and then in parentheses 4 plus 4. 10 squared is 100. If I do what's in parentheses, I get 8, which would be 100 plus 24, which is 124. If you have a few extra steps or do it slightly different, that's okay, just so long as you're not doing too many steps in one. And then here in parentheses, we have 3 times n squared. That is only the n that is squared, so that means that I only squared the 5. So it'd be 3 times 25 plus 2 times 4, or 75 plus 8, which is 83. The final problem says, Julio walks 5 days a week. He walks at a rate for 7 minutes and cools down for 2 minutes. Use a distributive property to write an equivalent expression that determines the total number of minutes Julio walks. So he does it 5 days. First, he does a fast rate for 7 minutes plus a cool down for 2. If I distribute, I get 35 plus 10, which in turn equals 45. If you have any questions, please let me know. Hopefully this helps and you feel well and prepared for the summative. Thank you. Have a great day.